Hey there, everybody. It's State Senator Mallory McMorrow coming to you on a Tuesday outside of our normal schedule for this week with Mallory. And we wanted to put this on to provide a budget update. So you may have missed it because it happened at 3:30 in the morning last week. But last Thursday was our final Senate session day for the summer recess. And it was about a 15, 16-hour session. So we met at 10 a.m. We got out at 3:30 in the morning. And that is to do the very important work of passing a state budget. So this is a special edition of This Week with Mallory to go through what is in the state budget. And in our office, we're also working on some graphics and some informational things to send out as well, because this is one of the most important things that your state legislature does. But we also know that it is really confusing. You know, it is a huge budget to operate for the entire state of Michigan for 10 million people. So we're going to give you some of the highlights, but also this is a plug to follow us on Facebook, check out our page, and sign up for our email newsletter, which we'll make sure that you have a link to sign up for, because we'll provide all the detail you could possibly want to know on the state budget. So this is a really big one. So typically, on average, our state budget for the past few years has hovered around the $60 billion total range for a state of about 10 million people. But this year's budget, what we approved, drum roll please, was $76.9 billion with a B dollars. Now that is a huge number. And if you are suddenly panic thinking, oh my gosh, how did we go from 60 up to 76.9 billion? We did it without raising any taxes. So I think that is something that is very important, especially right now when people are feeling the very real pains of inflation. No taxes were raised here. So this was a combination of higher revenue than projected state revenue, because Michigan's economy has actually recovered in a really strong position in the wake of the pandemic. Good reminder, we are still in a pandemic, so please be aware of that. But we recovered in a really strong way. So state revenues were up, and this is also with some of the one-time federal funding that we saw. So within this budget, there are ongoing investments, and there are also one-time investments, which are really important. So from the high level, the budget includes new money for school safety and teacher recruitment and retention programs, which is a huge point that I was very proud to vote yes for. Also includes local government debt relief. Something that you may have heard a lot about in previous years is pension liabilities. So for local governments who have a lot of outstanding debt because of pensions, mainly, there's a lot of money to relieve that. There's also blight removal in the budget, and more than $1 billion for local projects as well. And we can get into some of those. So what is in it? This fiscal year 2023 deal, so that starts in October for the fiscal year 2023, includes $22.1 billion in the education budget, which will support a $450 per pupil funding increase for our traditional public and charter schools, along with $210 million for school safety initiatives following the Oxford High School shooting, and $300 million for school mental health programs. Now, put this into perspective, because these are a lot of dollars throwing at you. So this is the highest state per pupil funding in Michigan history. Something that I have heard from many of you, from our constituents, is making sure that, especially as we return to some semblance of normal, as kids are back in school, kids went through a lot over the past few years, continue to go through a lot, and making sure that our schools are adequately funded and have the supports for kids to rebound, get back on track, is really, really important. So that is a 5.2% increase from the previous per pupil funding of $8,600 per student. There is also $50 million in stipends for student teachers to help pay for tuition costs while student teaching. So all of our teachers and teaching students, I have heard you loud and clear on this. We know that teaching is tough. Teaching is a career that people do because they love it. Nobody is getting rich becoming a teacher. And we know that many of our teachers not only have college degrees, but also master's degrees, sometimes doctorate degrees. And student teachers are asked to bear the brunt of a lot of that that to work towards that certification. So there is funding in there for that. $300 million in school mental health programs. This is, again, going back to how hard this has been on our kids and just how hard it is for a lot of us right now. School mental health programs are so important. We had a group of students come out to Lansing organized by March for Our Lives, which is sadly very appropriate given the day today and the news yesterday. But these students organized and came out to Lansing, not only with Oxford High School student survivors, but with students from all around the state. And they came to Lansing a few months ago to advocate for sensible gun reform and critically for mental health support in schools. And I am incredibly frustrated every time I hear these issues talked about as either or, that it is either gun violence or mental health support, when really we know that these things can and should go hand in hand. So there is additional funding for school mental health programs in there. And that is true not only for schools that have gone through trauma, that is just a necessary part of life. I have talked to so many kids in school who have told me they don't even know if their school has a counselor. Some of our schools share counselors and mental health providers with other schools. So I've heard from students who have said, I don't know if we have a counselor. I don't know how to get a hold of them. And in Michigan, we have one school counselor for every 768 students. The recommendation from the American Psychological Association is 1 per 250. So just imagine being a counselor and taking on that workload, and you're also helping students apply to colleges, everything else the counselors are doing. So that's huge, and that's going to be something that is a step in the right direction for all of our students and just for the mental health of our state. There's also $16 million for a 5% ongoing increase for community colleges. That is fantastic. $1.92 billion towards special education resources. We know that it is more resource intensive to provide quality education and wraparound services for our special education students. So that money is in the budget as well. There's $56 million to provide grants to each eligible community college to support students with an associate degree in nursing to earn a bachelor's degree in nursing. This is great. You know, one of the things that we have seen over the past few years is just the shortage of nursing medical professionals, people who are going into these fields. And this is another avenue to support getting that done and working your way towards a bachelor's degree. There's also $750 million to support municipal pensions. We mentioned that at the top here, helping ensure that a promise is made is a promise kept. You know, people who went into this work being promised a pension, a guaranteed income in retirement. That retirement is well earned, but we know that many of our municipalities have been suffering, especially in the wake of the last recession in 2007, 2008. Local revenue sharing has never fully recovered from that recession. And a lot of our municipalities have been in debt. So that is going to take a huge load off of municipalities and ensure that workers who went into local municipal work can retire with the retirement and the funding that you have deserved. On some local wins and for some things that we also advocate for, you may not know, the governor a few years ago appointed me to the State Council of Future Mobility and Electrification. I am one of 4 legislators. There's 1 Democrat and 1 Republican from the Senate, 1 Democrat and 1 Republican from the House who serve on this committee, with researchers from the University of Michigan, Michigan State, with our friends in labor from the UAW, with people who work in industry on battery technology, EV autonomous, with MDOT working on safety in lanes. So this is something that I am a part of regularly. And we know that one of the challenges towards electric vehicle adoption is chargers. If you've got a car and you want to know that you can drive it regularly, you can go up north, you can do everything you want to do with it. We need that charging infrastructure to match. And right now, with the gas prices we're seeing at the pump, this will ease if you are able to make that transition, if you want to make that transition. We are finally seeing a lot of really exciting vehicles come online that people want to buy, and vehicles that are dropping right around $30,000, some under $30,000. So it is becoming a more viable option so that we can really move towards energy independence with those vehicle charging stations. So there's $1 million in the budget for EV charging stations, $2 million for mobility futures, and for Berkeley. Sometimes we advocate for local projects for our community as well. And with COVID, we learned so much about an airborne virus and making sure our public spaces are safe. That requires good air circulation. So there's $700,000 for Berkeley for HVAC improvements in public spaces, which is huge. And we often advocate for projects for our district. And many of our municipalities over the past 4 years have gotten something in the budget that we've worked really, really hard for. So always working for you guys. Now, let me see. What else we have in the budget that may be worth talking about. Infrastructure. Infrastructure is always something that we talk about. There's $213 million in grants for 17 separate infrastructure projects around the state, which is really fantastic. We need to improve all of that. And right now, that's a lot of the highlights from the budget. One thing that did not come out of this budget is any sort of a tax cut. And you may hear some of my colleagues from the other side of the aisle really hammering hard on what that means. Now, a lot of the proposals that have been put up in the legislature are tax cuts that either would benefit the wealthiest among us or companies more than they would regular people. Or we saw a gas tax proposal put up in the legislature that I voted against because it wouldn't go into effect until 2023. And that is not immediate relief for people who are feeling the pain right now. Between my husband and I, we have a Chevy Bolt and a pickup truck. So we kind of cover the range of it. And when I'm driving the truck, I know that it hurts to fill it up. So there's still negotiation. We have about $7 billion left over. This is the first time since we passed a law requiring the budget to be done by July 1st that we actually hit that deadline. We passed that to try to make it easier for our schools. We know schools start the budget planning process much earlier in the summer. So a few years ago, the legislature, Republicans and Democrats worked together to push the constitutional date that the budget was due from October 1st to July 1st. And then we had a pandemic, and that made it a lot harder to get together and negotiate. So we have unfortunately missed that deadline for a few years. But this year, we stayed all through the night. We stayed hydrated and had snacks. And thank you. Huge shout out to Liz, who will be coming on here very shortly, for keeping me snacked and hydrated. And we had a pretty funny Twitter thread about the snacks that we ate on the floor, which people seemed interested in. But we stayed through the night. We got it done by 3:30 in the morning on July 1st, which is really, really important, especially, like I said, for our schools to move forward. But that means that there is still some room to play with, and I know that negotiations will continue. We know with inflation and some of the pressures that people are feeling it right now. So I want to make sure that I am continuing to fight for something that will provide, number one, equitable relief. That is huge for me. Making sure that if we pass anything, that it is not really rewarding those at the top without really helping average working families. That is huge for me. And also that relief is actual relief that you can use right now. If we're passing something that doesn't go into effect until 2023, that doesn't help you, and I'm going to vote against it. So we're continuing to work on that. The governor has proposed one-time $500 rebate checks. So you would just get a check. That hasn't been of interest to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but more work is ongoing. But those are the major budget highlights. And we're going to keep this coffee hour pretty short. I know that there is a lot happening in the country and the world to talk about, and we will have a lot of time to talk about that moving forward. But Liz, do we have any budget-related questions in the comments? Now, shout out, in case anybody doesn't know, because we are live, you are able to ask questions in the comments on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We just ask that you put your name, what city you live in, so that we can make sure we are answering constituent questions, and fire away with your question. Like I said, we will have way more info on how the budget works, what's in it, graphics and all that, but we just wanted to give you some of the highlights, because this is actually something that I'm always very proud of, is that despite all the political divisiveness, we have done a lot of great work over the 4 years that I've been in the Senate on the budget, and there's a lot of good in this budget, which is going to set us up for success in 2023. So with that, Liz, do we have any budget questions?
Not specifically related directly to the budget. Someone asked previously when we posted that our coffee hour beach day was talking about tax relief, and when would that be, a conversation? And I know we're going to return in the fall, so I don't know if you wanted to, I guess, expand on it anymore, but I think you did a great job of covering.
Yeah, absolutely. I can
That wasn't
expand on it a little bit more. So the budget
Yeah.
is sort of this mysterious thing. And we have quarterly meetings with all of our municipalities in our office to make sure that we are consistently advocating for what's important to our district. We get feedback from residents. The budget process is a year-round process. So even though this is the major budget, you will often see what's called a supplemental budget, which is a much smaller budget that goes along with the entire state budget that tackles one issue at a time, an area of the budget at a time. And those can happen at any time. So right now the legislature is on recess. We do have a couple of tentative session days, one in July and one in August. And that means we are working in our districts until then. So that supplemental budget with relief really could happen at any time. Again, I want to make sure, given the pressures right now, that anything we do pass would provide actual immediate relief for people and make sure that we are supporting those who are the most impacted by inflation, not a kind of flat tax cut that would only benefit wealthy people. Even though this budget is $76.9 billion, which is larger than we have ever seen, in 2019, and we are happy to share this again, we can put it out in future meetings, we learned from Senate Fiscal, business leaders from Michigan and others, that adjusted for inflation, the state of Michigan has actually been operating with the same revenue that we had in 1968. So Michigan is a fairly lean state, and over that time, we gained 2.5 million more people. So that puts more wear on our health systems, our roads, our schools, and we want to make sure that any relief, any tax cuts that go into effect are not going to put Michigan back into a hole, especially if we end up in another downturn, an economic downturn. We want to make sure that you as residents have relief, but that it is sustainable, that we can still fund our schools, that we can still fund our roads, that your tax dollars are not being wasted or not just given to the wealthiest among us. So more to come. Probably not a satisfying answer. A supplemental can happen at any time, but we will keep everybody posted as we go forward.
Yeah, so those are the, I guess, only budget related questions that we have been provided, but we do have a mom in the comments that their daughter is starting college in the fall, and the stipend that we pass within this budget would be really, really welcoming news to her as she starts her teaching journey.
Oh, that's so exciting. That is great feedback. And, this is a really hard job sometimes, but it's that direct feedback that makes it worthwhile. So thank you. And congratulations to your daughter. Thank you for going into teaching. I know that she is going to be an amazing teacher, and I'm glad that this will help.
All right. Yeah. So those are all the budget related questions that we have.
All right. Perfect. Well, Liz, with that, I will let you go. Thank you very much. With that, we wanted to keep this one short, but like I said, I know that there is a lot to discuss related to what has happened in the Supreme Court, related to the horrific violence that we saw yesterday, not only in Illinois, but in Philadelphia, around the country. I know that a lot of people are feeling really down right now and hopeless. And we will make sure that there is time to discuss all of those things and what we can do, how we can be involved. I know that a lot of people this year reached out and said that they didn't feel right celebrating the 4th of July. But I want to go into just a little bit. We walked in the Clawson 4th of July parade yesterday. I brought my daughter Noah, and we shared a photo on the Facebook page and over on Twitter and on Instagram. Mom gave me permission to do so. But a little boy who I had actually met back in October at Clawson's downtown trick-or-treating, he was an Ewok at the time, super cool. I saw their family at the parade, and I ran over, and he ran out and gave me a big hug. And I know that it's hard sometimes, but I know that our communities and our people and our country and our state, I mean, all of this is worth fighting for. That's why I got into this. That's why I know so many people are involved. And it's really hard when it feels like we're more divided than ever, when there's so much hate and violence and vitriol. But I'm glad that we went out yesterday. I saw so many people lining the streets, and recognizing that this is a country that was founded on an ideal of participation and working towards a more perfect union, not a perfect union right off the bat. And it reminded me how grateful I am to live in a country where it is a country by the people. I am somebody who didn't have experience in politics, who ran for office, and I'm here and trying to make an impact and make it better. And that can be really hard sometimes, but it's the basis of this. And it was really wonderful to be out and to see people. And it means that we get back to work tomorrow. So we will have more time and space to talk about a lot of other issues and share information, and more on the budget so that it can be easy to understand and you understand the process. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in on a Tuesday. And I hope that you and your family stay safe. Take the time you need for yourself, and then we will see you back out here next time.